What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. So I get a lot of questions from people always asking, how come Congress is pretty much standing still, sitting on their hands, doing nothing? Well, it's because there's no urgency. They don't need to. But things are about to change, and this is why this is very good news. So we do have good news coming out. The media is now talking about what is about to happen. Okay, we don't know if it's going to happen, but it's about to happen. That's what I'm discussing in today's video, because again, this is good news. We're finally going to get some answers. This is regarding Social Security. This is regarding the government funding bill. This is regarding the child tax credits, the Trump tax cuts. There's a lot of things here. So we're going to discuss that in today's video. If you have any questions whatsoever, please ask your questions down in the comment section below. Now, what's the good news? Well, the good news is we actually have a time limit. There's a deadline. That is September 30th. Because on September 30th, that is the day that the government runs out of money. No more funding. And that's simply because we have a government funding bill for the fiscal year. Fiscal year ends September 30th, which means we need the new funding bill for the following year, for fiscal year 2024. Well, that starts on October 1st. So the good news is that Congress is coming back this next week. Okay, so we got the Senate. They will be back in session tomorrow. That's good news. The Senate will be back in session. They will start discussing stuff in person. The next piece of good news is that the House of Representatives comes back next week. Okay, in a week from tomorrow, they will be back in session, which means they will start discussing things in person. And the other thing is that once they're back, and the House of Representatives will be back on September 12th, once they're back, now we could potentially see a bill. Now we could see both the Senate and the House start working together and pass some type of bipartisan legislation. That's the good news. The reason why this is such good news is because we can't start working on Social Security. We can't start working on the child tax credits, which I talked about yesterday. We can't start working on the Trump tax cuts. We can't do any of that stuff until after the appropriations bills, the 12 appropriations bills for fiscal year 2024 are passed. Well, that all starts tomorrow. The next thing is there's a deadline, and that is September 30th. Now, just want to be very clear, I don't think we're going to pass the 12 appropriations bills by September 30th. No way. I think we're going to have a stopgap bill. Either stopgap bill or continuing resolution to get us into either December or potentially into 2024, like January or February. With that said, once there's an agreement on a stopgap bill or a continuing resolution, then lawmakers can start discussing other things. Like, you know what Democrats really want? They want $40 billion to go to Ukraine, some to go to, FEMA, right? And I talked about this, it was earlier this week or last week. And I said, well, I guess today's Monday, so it would have been last week. I said, what the issue is going to be is FEMA's asking for $12 billion. Okay? President Biden wants $12 billion to go to FEMA. And that's good, because with the hurricanes, with the wildfires that we've seen, right? We need the money for FEMA, because FEMA, I believe, has like $1.6 billion left. And they were saying that by the middle of September, they were going to run out of money. And so at that point, they are only worried. They're not even worried about rebuilding. They're just making sure that people have water and food and some shelter, but they can't rebuild. And so it is essential that $40 billion or that $12 billion goes to FEMA. However, that $12 billion is also tied to Ukraine. I believe it's $24 billion go into Ukraine. That is where Republicans say, no, we cannot jump on board with additional funding to Ukraine, especially in today's times. We're trying to limit our expenses, try to reduce spending. And yet you want to keep sending $24 billion over to Ukraine, where the last I read, Russia is struggling. And so there's a good chance Ukraine is going to be able to win this thing. But it's going to take time and probably more money. So that's the other piece of good news, is once the appropriations bills are passed, we'll have an answer on the funding for Ukraine and for FEMA, because those are likely going to be tied to it. But what about Social Security? What about child tax credit payments? Well, let's talk about Social Security for a second. Here's where things are at. What we continue to hear is that lawmakers want to pass something for Social Security, but how do they get the funding for it? Do they increase taxes? Do they tax the rich? Do they increase the Social Security income cap or the income percentage? We don't know. They're discussing different things. According to one report that I read this morning, it's not a highly reputable source, so I'm not going to go into detail of it. But there were reports that there is a new bipartisan bill for Social Security, and it says there's multiple senators involved. It doesn't say anything about the House of Representatives, but at the same time, multiple senators could be 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and they have some type of bipartisan bill that's going to increase benefits to Social Security. However, there's still many more senators that have to agree. And so again, is there a chance we see an increase to Social Security? Of course. But is it likely? The likelihood isn't high. That's why I bring this up. So one thing I can tell you is there are discussions happening right now. We don't know exactly what's going to happen over the next, few weeks. But the good news is it's starting. It's going to start tomorrow, where we're going to start to see discussions, and these are going to be in person. These negotiations, we're going to have more updates. Right now, excuse me, and we've always had this in the month of August. And I know we're in September, but the month of August is when lawmakers, they take a recess, take the entire month off. So we don't hear a lot of updates. We don't hear a lot from them. A little bit here and there. But the biggest thing is September. September is the big month. We always have so many different plans and proposals and ideas and discussions and negotiations. It's actually good because this gives us an idea of what exactly people are looking for. Okay? The next thing I just want to touch on is we are about a year away from the next election. The next election will be in November of 2024. We're coming up on that. We're 14 months away. So the reason why I just wanted to mention that is simply because we are going to see, as the timeline gets closer, right? The time gets nearer for the presidential election of 2024. My expectation is we are actually going to see more and more promises. This is going to be for things like Social Security, for the child tax credit payments, for low-income families, for the unemployed, just for the economy, individuals, people with student loan debt. The promises, we're going to have so many. But it's what actually gets passed and what comes back to the American people. So as we get more information as to what is going on there, as we get more information as to what potentially could pass, I promise I'll come back on and I'll share all the latest news and updates. All I ask is if you can spend just 2 seconds, go ahead, hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and I will see you guys on the next one.